doo da doo doo da boop a doo da boo doo bo.
Hello everyone and welcome to another LRM Ranks It. I am of course not Kyle alone, rather I am Nick Dahl filling in as host because Kyle was recently acquired by Disney, just like Fox. We couldn't keep him around. 20th Century Fox, not a reviewer Fox. I am joined, you heard that cackle, you've seen him on the screen, by Joseph Jammer Medina, our editor-in-chief. Say hello, Joseph.
Would you classify that as a cackle? I guess it is. I
More
don't
of a
like that.
chuckle.
It makes me sound like a witch.
That
Yeah.
was him. He's here. You can see him. You can see me. Today we are going to be doing Disney movies pre-1980. So the oldest stuff, starting with Snow White in 1937. In fact, December 21st, 1937. The very first animated Disney film. The real reason Kyle isn't here is that, again, he doesn't like musicals.
Monster.
Yeah, he's a monster. He's an absolute monster. So I'm again hosting for the first time, depending what order these come out. So before we get into our top 5 Disney animated movies from Walt Disney Animation before 1980, that are feature length, because there was one on the list that I couldn't use because it wasn't.
No, it also wasn't a Disney animated movie or an animated studio thing.
It was just a short. Because it was on it was on Wikipedia page for it. It was on a different, I don't know. I found on a different list than Kyle did.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was.
It's one of the
But
ones,
anyways, I'll let you continue.
it's one of the ones on my list is feature length, but it's because it's 2 movies in one, but it is on Kyle's list. So, boo.
You prove nothing.
Before we get into that, just to remind you, you're watching LRM Ranks It. It comes out every Tuesday on LRMonline.com. Remember, always go to LRMonline.com. It also comes out on YouTube, of course, if you're jumping straight to there. After you see this, tomorrow on Wednesday, we will release a longer podcast version where we'll go more in depth into everything, and that can be, of course, found at LRMonline.com and Apple, iTunes, everywhere except for Stitcher at the moment. Other than that, let's get into it. I'll do more plugging later. So, Jammer, since I am the generous host that Kyle usually is, what is your 5th favorite Disney movie before 1980 from Walt Disney Animation?
So I'm not really enthusiastic about most of these movies on the list, but I'll start with my number 5. My number 5 is Pinocchio. The story obviously about a puppet, or I guess marionette rather, who wants to be a real boy. His journey into all kinds of crazy stuff, and into the whale. Like, it's all really weird and really loose and really dark. The animation is beautiful. And as a kid, I watched the hell out of it so many times. And I think it does overall hold up, but there is a different sensibility that is in this. And this kind of goes through to most of the movies, or at least, let me think here. I'd say 3 of the movies out of the 5 on this list, there's a different sensibility of storytelling. It's less about telling like a big, long, cohesive story, and more about just letting scenes play out that have some sort of loose connection to it. And that's kind of why, for me, even the stuff that's quote-unquote relevant to the story feels like it can kind of be off on its own little subplot. And I feel like that's a way for a lot of these stories. But beautiful animation, classic story overall. I still like the movie, but I'm less enthusiastic about this list than I was in the other lists that we have coming up.
Interesting. I just remember about Pinocchio, I was terrified by the boys turning into donkeys.
Yeah, it's a very hard life lesson.
Still a nightmare.
Don't be a jackass.
Every night. I wake up screaming. Night terrors. Okay. So I picked for number 5, Sword in the Stone. Everyone knows the story. I don't even need to go into the story of Sword in the Stone. But it's just, it's a fun child's retelling. I mean, you got Merlin and you got a younger Arthur. I remember the scene where they turn into birds and fly around for training or something, or teaching about magic. Again, I didn't rewatch it. I don't even remember the finale. I just remember liking it a lot as a child.
Yeah. It kind of has a whimper of a finale. I mean, like I said before, it is kind of just a loose compilation of scenes with like thin strings holding things together.
Yeah, I would have to agree, and I don't have much more to say about that one. So I'll let you go on to your number four, Jammer.
I will say I'll have more to say about Sword in the Stone later. My
Excellent.
number four is Rescuers. We talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna actually. No, I'm not gonna say anything else. The Rescuers. Uh, I think is probably one of the more cohesive stories in this because it is a complete story with protagonists and goals and all that. It's less obsessed with just showing off fun things in animation and more obsessed with finding telling a story. Involving this little orphan girl, and this ugly lady. Man, they just indulge in how and making her completely just trashy and awful. And yeah, I just think it's a fun story. It's not to me, fuck it. It's not to me as fun as its sequel, The Rescuers Down Under, which we'll talk about later. And I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it's also the swampy location, but everything about it is just sort of grimy. And I'm usually all about grimy, but for some reason I found it very off-putting. And maybe it has to also do with the animation, which was at a very rough stage in it, where I believe they would draw like on a specific type of paper, where they would there'd be a lot of leftover um, sketches on the finished product, so that it doesn't look as clean or as polished as we're used to Disney movies looking nowadays, or we did back in the Disney Renaissance. So it doesn't feel as finished and polished, but overall I still think it has a leg up on most of the stories in this era, in that it has a complete narrative, which sounds really weird to say.
I gotta agree. I'm gonna talk about it more later, but while we're on the topic of it now, I actually kind of like the rough animation. It's one of
Yeah.
the things I actually enjoyed the animation in these more than are in the 80s and 90s, because it kind of has character. Like in Rescuers, the opening scene is obviously like looks like watercolor, and you can see the
Mm-hmm.
material it's even like been done on, because it's a lot of stills of the bottle going through the ocean. And I definitely noticed the roughness of the mice walking too. I actually kind of found it a little bit charming. Because my number four is Peter Pan. Again,
Mm.
I don't think I need to get into the story of Peter Pan. Everyone knows it. This is also one I didn't have time to rewatch, so I'm going on childhood memories. I liked it a lot as a kid. Who doesn't want to go to Neverland and be a kid forever and hang out with Peter Pan and fly? Even though he's kind of abducting children, I guess.
To be fair, when I was a kid, I didn't want to stay a kid. I wanted to be an adult. I don't know about you. It wasn't appealing. I never
True.
had existential woes about growing up when I was a kid.
True, I guess, because yeah, you want to be an adult, and then when you get to an adult, you're like, I would love to do my childhood again.
Right,
No
exactly.
job, no. I got given stuff. My favorite part of that movie, just from memory, is obviously Shmi and Hook, Captain Hook.
Mhm.
So they're always, and again, we talk a lot about villains when we talk about the 80s and 90s in the future. Um, but yeah, that's a fun villain sidekick combo. I remember the most from it, and obviously the landing on the clock, Big Ben. That shot is always like iconic.
Yeah, the very iconic shot. It's not on my list. It was close, but Pinocchio ended up taking its spot. A lot of great moments. Yeah, Hook is a particularly vulnerable villain compared to most villains, and how whiny and cryy he is in that movie.
Let's hear your number three.
My number three is Robin Hood,
Hmm.
simply because it has like the best music out there, which is basically mostly a guy whistling and humming the entire time, and I love it. Just that song. Wait, I'm gonna do this. Here we go. No, no, I gotta add that little extra thing he does. And then it's basically him just going but yeah, I like that song a lot. Actually, and speaking of whiny villains,
Oh God,
the
yeah,
freaking yeah, like I was wrong. I'm full of shit. This guy is he's worse.
he's so
Um,
good.
he's so whiny, and I remember being really confused. This is a complete tangent from that. I remember being confused as a kid because I felt like a lot of these characters were pulled directly from the Jungle Book, and I was like, are these the same
Oh
characters
yeah.
or are these different characters? And I didn't know because you had Baloo and you had freaking, Shere Khan. Wait, was Shere Khan in this? Some form of him?
No, I
I
mean
don't know.
the
Um,
king is a lion, or
he's a
yeah,
lion,
it's
so it's
close
not yeah.
enough.
But then you had like Ka or the equivalent of Ka or whatever.
Mhm.
In retrospect, I haven't watched it in a couple years, and in my mind, I'm thinking, what were these characters' names? I mean, I guess he was Little John, right?
Yeah, Robin Hood and Little
Yeah.
John walking through the forest.
Run,
Yeah.
hootin' and a hollering, blah 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 blah. Yeah. A lot of great moments. This was another situation where even as a kid, I noticed this was a weird movie because there was a thread kind of, but it was mostly just a lot of scenes. And I remember even that scene where I think they burned down the prince's like castle or something, or no, yeah, and they were trying to shoot Robin Hood in the water, and it felt like it should have been a climax, but it really wasn't. And I noticed that with a lot of these movies where the climax almost comes way early, but that's just because it was like one of several vignettes that maybe happened to feel like it had more stakes than the rest of it. Um, but I found overall this to be a lot more entertaining, and I liked that it had kind of an ensemble cast to it and a lot of characters to follow that you can connect with. And I love the rooster very much, and all the little kids. I wanted to be that little rabbit kid who got the sword from, or not the sword,
Bow.
the bow and arrow from Peter Pan. I wanted the
Robin
bow
Hood.
and arrow very much. Sorry, Robin Hood. I wanted the bow very much as a kid, and yeah, he got to live my dream.
Cool. I'll be talking more about Robin Hood later. So I'm gonna go on to my number three, which you've already talked about a little bit, and I've already talked a little bit about The Rescuers. I meant to be listing the years for all these. Rescuers is 1977, biggest movie of the year. It blew Star Wars out of the water. Um,
Did it really?
no, of course it made less than Star Wars.
Oh, it could have. I don't fucking
No.
know.
This is the reason Disney wanted
They
to
made
buy
a
Fox.
they made a sequel. They made a sequel, so
Yeah, that's true. And the sequel is actually quite delayed looking at those dates. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's you talked about it a lot. She's gross and grimy. Her name is Medusa. What's her name? Well, all the animation is like you said. And then her assistant's so weird. I rewatched this one last night. And just I don't know. I love the old cat. I forgot about him. He's like, yeah, Penny was here. She always treated me good. Like to go to him for information.
Oh yeah. I remember that cat because I wanted to eat ginger snaps because he had the catnap snaps. You remember that?
Yeah, because I just watched it last night. But you say that in the other one too. You're like, I really don't want to eat those Cocoa Puffs because I saw a cat being fed them. You want to eat whatever Disney
Yeah.
cats are eating.
Animation brings out the inner fatty in me.
But I don't think I need to say a lot more about The Rescuers. We'll go more in detail on the podcast, and you've already discussed it.
My number 2 is The Sword in the Stone. And I always remember that opening book at the beginning. The good king had died, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, this thus started the journey of young Wart and his ascent to the throne. And just like Robin Hood, and just like, other movies, it just felt like a string of scenes connected very loosely. Because that scene, I think the one that felt like the climax was the showdown between Mad Madam Mim and Merlin. And it wasn't. There was this whole latter portion where Merlin left, and Wart kind of had to figure some other shit out himself, and then Merlin came back and was just like totally fine with it for no explainable reason at all. He was just got over it essentially. And yeah, it was just interesting. It's basically just a slow, I guess you could call it a Bildungsroman type story where the character kind of just learns a little bit more and more as he gets older. But when all said and done, he still kind of succeeded because it was a fluke. So I like how I'm just poking holes in these fucking stories as if they're bad. But all in all, like for me, when it comes to story structure, it's very clearly a different game now compared to what it used to be. It used to be, let's do some fun stuff in animation and kind of just go nuts and creative with it. Whereas now it's all about actual character building and stuff. So they were less concerned about that stuff.
Like I said
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one in a long time. So it really opens with the book coming off the shelf thing and then opening the pages.
I don't know if it comes off a shelf.
Okay.
It might just open.
Because my next one is Robin Hood, my number 2. And they do that in the beginning with the book opening, and it's like
Yeah,
the
I think a
story
lot
of
of them do
Robin
that.
Hood. And that one has beautiful opening animations for all the characters. That's one of the moments I noticed. I'm like, wow, they don't do it in like this kind of style anymore. And I mean, Robin Hood, I think, is my favorite Disney 2D animation protagonist ever. Like, I just
Yeah.
worshipped Robin Hood, the fox. He's a fox, but like just how cool and like laid back he was, and yet precise. He's kind of like, I don't know who to compare him to in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Maybe a Tony
Why do
Stark.
you need to compare
Well, I'm
him
just
to
thinking like,
Marvel
who's a character I
Cinematic
like now? That'd be
Universe?
he's almost like a Han Solo in a way, or without being a
Okay.
scoundrel, where he's kind of like, I'm good at this. I can like talk my way out of anything. Um,
He's a Nick Wilde, except less
yes, he's
skeezy.
very much a Nick Wilde, which is why Nick Wilde is probably my favorite Disney 3D animation character. Wow, good connection.
Right.
Obviously, they're both
Hmm.
foxes. Good
Yeah.
connection.
Very. Oh, no one else out there came up with that connection but me. I'm completely original in that regard.
So, since we've already talked about that a little bit, let's move on to your number one. Wait. Let me
My
plug
number.
stuff before we go on to number one. That way people have to sit in
Fair enough.
suspense. Again, you're watching LRM Ranks It. We're on Tuesdays, video, Wednesdays, podcast. Normally Kyle's hosting. Sometimes I'm a guest. Sometimes Jammer a guest. He has other guests. Stefan, I don't know if he's done it. I think Cam is doing one with him, has done with him. Of course, we have other great content in LRM Online.
We got the weekly comic pools, which we try to shoot on Friday, along with DC Weekly also on Friday.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, before I forget at the end, like last time or in the future, make sure to subscribe below. There's buttons to press down there. Click like, do comments at us, tell us how wrong we are, how right we are. Just click the subscribe button, the notification button. That's all below us somewhere. And that way you are staying up to date on everything that is LRM. All right. And without further ado, your number one. Sir.
My number one is 101 Dalmatians.
Nice.
Because damn, I do love me some dogs. I love dogs growing up. I'm not alone in that regard. And I remember wanting to own these puppies. And the idea that this lady would turn them into coats was horrifying then, but is more horrifying now if you think about it. I don't know. As an adult, it's like, oh wow, this lady, she was crazy. She was so evil. For no reason. There's literally no motivation. Other than just she wants what she wants. And I like the fact that we have scenes where Roger is just like, no, I'm not going to put up with this shit. And just does not like her, does not put up with her shit. And, is not willing to settle in and get her, give her an inch in anything. And she's used to getting her way. And I even like how the maid is definitely the same way. Like, I like the fact that most of these characters do not take shit from these bad people. It just things shake out in a way to where they, it still happens. And then you have, Pongo and Perdita, two likable characters. And I always remember as well the very scratchy animation that you mentioned. Did you watch this one again by chance?
No, I did not have time. It's not on my list. So.
I always remember when Cruella de Vil is in her car and she's driving in the snow, how the snow looked like cookies and cream ice cream. And that made me want cookies and cream ice cream. Once again, got me hungry for no reason whatsoever. But I just remember all the fond memories I had, and even as a kid thinking it was interesting, like, oh, this movie doesn't have any songs. I mean, it has songs, but not in the same musical sense as a lot of them. Yeah, but I mean, it's like not the same.
No, I agree.
Yeah, it's like different.
I always remember about it the scene where the dog and the human that owns it are waiting expectantly about the having the puppies. And like, it's a very typical scene, but it's the guy and the dog, and it's kind of funny. And then I also always remember the animation of the smoke. Because Cruella de Vil's always smoking, and they don't make it, again, she's the villain, and she's smoking, and it like comes out green. So it's not like a smoke kids thing. Like, Right Mouse Detective has good guys smoking once in a while when they're undercover. So yeah, that was a pretty good pick. I didn't rewatch it. I don't have as fond memories of it because my number one is the oldest one on my list from 1949, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which is the two-parter I was talking about. It's two separate stories. First, you have Mr. Toad's wild ride, more or less, with Toad wasting all of his fortune. He's rich. He has Toad Manor. He has Badger doing his books, and Badger brings in his friends, which is a mouse and a mole. Or a rat and a mole, I don't know, but the rat, all of them look like they're characters that could have been out of The Rescuers or Great Mouse Detective. He's just got this mustache, the mouse and stuff, and yeah, he brings him in, and Toad's going crazy. He's like singing with a horse drunk, and he's getting drunk, and he buys a motor car, and he goes like mad for the motor car, and it's a wild ride. It's a very strange one, and I like it a lot.
Was that a pun?
Yeah, it was. You like it?
Okay, just making sure. Yeah, I liked it. It was good. I just wasn't sure if it was intentional. I wanted to draw attention to it so you couldn't blow right past
Now
it.
you just ruined it. Now everyone knows that.
Mm-hmm.
Punny. All right. And then the second part, of course, there's 2 movies, is Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I just think it's called Ichabod or some Crane or something.
Mm-hmm.
And this one doesn't, I don't think, have any dialogue. It's all being narrated, and when the bad guy, or the guy the big muscular guy that reminds me of Gaston, how he's animated, but yet Ichabod's the one getting all the women. He's really angry about it. So I think his dialogue is the narrator when he's singing the song about the headless horseman. And of course it ends with Ichabod Crane getting killed by that headless horseman. Or it says, or the narrator's like, perhaps he's off in some other town with a wife and like 20 kids. It's just so dark. But I forgot to point out, it's kind of funny when it opens with a book too, just like Robin Hood, and it actually says,
yeah, a lot of animated movies did.
as it's going across the shelf, it's like, now you've probably heard tales of, like, it lists like Robin Hood. It does mention Sword in the Stone. Like, it mentions other movies they're going to do in the future. It's like, but I don't think you've heard this great little story that's like better than all of them.
That's funny. That's cool.
It like predicts.
I haven't seen this movie in a long time. I think last time I saw it was like on TV, like on Disney Channel 15, 20 years ago or something. So it's been a long time since I'd seen this movie. I do remember it. I do remember a lot of the Sleepy Hollow stuff, mostly. The Ichabod stuff. And I remember last time I watched it, it took a longer time to get to the climax than I remembered it.
When I watched it a few years ago, I realized that. I did rewatch it last night, and this is probably the VHS I watched the most out of all my Disneys.
Interesting.
Yeah, weird, right?
All of them, or just all of them from this era?
I mean, all of them, probably. I'd love to go back to this one and The Reluctant Dragon, which I couldn't use even though it was on the list I found. All right.
It's not on the... It's not... Well, okay. We're going to talk about this in the extended podcast.
Anything else to add about anything, Jammer?
Nope. Nothing else to add.
All right. Again, go to LRM Online for everything you need. Subscribe below. Listen for the podcast of this the day after you watch it, or if you're not watching it the day it comes out, it's out too. So without further ado, adios.
Hey everybody, did you like what you just watched? Do you want to see more? Check out the other great videos available here on the LRM Online YouTube channel. Also, go check out our website, lrmonline.com, to see all the great stories that we publish every day.